In the days leading up to the planned end of Israel's 10-month-old settlement moratorium, there were ever more insistent calls on the Jewish state to continue the freeze and not build on land that would be part of a new Palestinian state. Even the United States, Israel's main backer, joined in the chorus.
What I've said to Prime Minister Netanyahu is that given so far the talks are moving forward in a constructive way, it makes sense to extend that moratorium so long as the talks are moving in a constructive way.
But on Sunday evening, Israel's government let the building moratorium end to the applause of many settlers. Construction projects that had been on hold restarted, including some of the 2,000 new housing units ready to go up. Some senior Israeli officials were on hand to encourage them. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called on settler leaders to show restraint, but the government he heads contains hardline pro-settler parties, and analysts say he was in no mood to disappoint them by extending the freeze.
I think he's making a calculation that President Abbas doesn't have anywhere else to go, doesn't have other good choices, needs to continue these talks as well, and therefore that maybe Netanyahu doesn't need to give that much.
The next day, the decision was widely condemned, including by the United States and other Western countries.
Clearly, we now have a problem in the expiry, without renewal so far, of the settlement moratorium last night. We urge, in the UK, we urge very strongly the government of Israel to extend the settlement moratorium.
The decision to end the building freeze was not unexpected, but it set off a flurry of diplomatic activity. Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian leader, had warned that if settlement construction resumed, peace talks would be, quote, a waste of time. But on Monday, he promised to wait at least a week until he meets with Arab leaders in Cairo before considering a possible pullout from the talks. In the meantime, diplomats are desperately trying to find some compromise that could keep the talks alive.
The United States is really going to want to keep these talks going. I think it's going to be pressing both sides. I'm sure the United States is pressing Prime Minister Netanyahu to come up with some kind of a package of incentives. Now, I don't know what that might be. It might include some further limits on settlement construction. It might include other steps. There are always steps that Israel could take, like lifting movement restrictions in the West Bank, prisoner releases, etc. I think the United States is probably the one who most wants these talks to continue, because otherwise it will really look like a diplomatic failure for President Obama.
There is one line of thinking among American analysts that the crisis over settlement building is inevitable, but not necessarily fatal for the talks.
In a way, if the moratorium lapses, that could be a good thing if it shows that the negotiations can continue. Because if the Palestinians break off the negotiations over this issue, to me it shows that there was never a chance for a negotiated settlement.
Israel's decision to ignore the almost universal international pressure and allow settlement construction to resume does not bode well for the future of the talks. For now, the Palestinians have not pulled out, but these negotiations appear to be hanging by a thread. For Political Agenda, this is Burton in Washington.